Welcome, everyone. I certainly know many of you. I'm Patrick Mann. I'm the director of the School for Advanced Studies in the Arts and Humanities, and we apologize for starting a little bit late, and I was the late comer, but anyway, we're really happy to be here with our wonderful fourth-year students, fourth and fifth-year students who are presenting their learning from experience presentations, and I want to say something about that. But before I do want to do a land acknowledgement and acknowledge that Western and many of us here in London are on the lands, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape-Pewak, and the Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and the Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. These lands continue to be homes to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, who we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And it's very important to all of us at SASAH to remain cognizant of our indebtedness to Indigenous peoples in this area and beyond. So, welcome. This, as we call it, is our Learning from Experience presentations. And when we came up with that title a few years ago, it was just a simple flip of experiential learning to learning from experience. Seemed a bit clever and simple. And in retrospect, I think it actually says quite a lot. There's no question that our students do learn from the experience of working in the community, whether with businesses, with nonprofits, with educational endeavors, but as well they're learning from the experience of the people, of the stewards and mentors who they work with in those various contexts. And perhaps in addition to that, and maybe almost as importantly, they learn from each other. And it's through these presentations. So today you're going to hear 7-minute presentations from 9 of our students, one at a time, and they will be followed by about a 3-minute question period. And so the students need to be efficient about teaching us what they learned and also sharing some of their reflections on what that experience means to them now, sometimes, 6 months later or that much later. Before we begin, I do want to thank our Experiential Learning Coordinator, Barbara Bruce, Dr. Barbara Bruce, who does an amazing job. The kind of stewardship that she does, I think, emulates the kind of thing that we are really sort of trying to help the students garner in terms of the way to apply themselves in the university and beyond. So that's really an important role that Barb plays. Many others in our area do as well, certainly Jen Tramble and our Associate Director, Ara Suksi. And there's others in the community of Western who are assisting us. And if I've forgotten names and faces, I will ask Barb to maybe catch us up on that as we go along. So in terms of process, we're going to begin with Hanbi Lee. And Hanbi will give her presentation for 7 minutes, and we have the chat turned on. So if people have questions following Hanbi's presentation, I would ask you simply to, if you're out in the world, actually I'll put on the Q&A as well, so you can use either the Q&A or the chat, whatever is available to you. And certainly also I will ask if any of the students or Era or Jen Tramble, if any of the people on screen has questions as well. And we'll try and be efficient with that. I guess my last question for us is, Barb, can you remind me who's keeping time and how's that going to go?
Jen's keeping time,
Okay.
and go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, no, I'll interject and have the timer go off at 6 minutes just to give you a minute warning.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Jen. And the rest of us will certainly keep our mics off while the student is presenting, but then anybody who's on screen who wants to ask a question, I think there's few enough of you, you can just raise your hand. You don't need to use a blue hand. And I'll just try and sort of manage that part. So I'm really happy to introduce our 5th-year student, Hanbi Lee, who's speaking about this SASAH and the Forest City Film Festival internship. Hanbi.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen so you guys can see my presentation. Are you guys able to see that? Okay, great. Okay, actually, let me just move this. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Hanbi, and I am a 5th year SASAH student. I'm also studying computer science as my double major, and today I'm going to be talking about 2 of my internship experiences from the past 4 months. So the first internship that I did was actually with SASAH. I was offered a position by Western to work as a summer student teaching support intern. And basically what that means is I get to help faculty professors to set up their virtual classes for the upcoming school year. So for me, I worked with 2 SASAH professors, Professor Kate Stanley, who I'd actually met before because I took one of her classes in my 2nd year, and I was also introduced to Professor Miranda Green-Bartit, and I helped them organize their OWL sites, and I was kind of their tech support when they needed it. And with Kate, I also helped her create an optimal learning space for students as they transitioned into online learning. And of course, as part of that, I was also able to help her brainstorm ways to kind of optimize that learning environment by bringing in my own student perspective into the picture. As with any internship, there were many challenges, but I think my biggest one was working from home, which is kind of ironic now that I think about it, just because I was helping to optimize the learning experience while I myself was struggling to adapt to the online work experience. I think the main issue was with communication. Just that lack of face-to-face relationship building. Of course, working remotely is also a big source of miscommunication. And when school picked up the pace, I found it difficult to maintain prompt communication as well. But despite these things, I was still able to come out with a lot of learning outcomes. I became really familiar with the OWL site. I was able to build new relationships, and I was really encouraged actually by how invested both professors were in helping their students transition smoothly into online learning and achieve success. And of course, I myself being a student and knowing the difficulties that this year has posed, that was really encouraging to me. And also it got me thinking about user experience, which is actually useful to me currently as I'm participating as a designer in a software development project. And user experience is a huge part of software design. And I think it was really the organizing of OWL sites and figuring out how to optimize and maximize the benefit that students would gain from navigating the OWL site easily. That really got me thinking about it. And yeah, it's been a really great experience overall. My second internship was with Forest City Film Festival. I was their marketing communications intern. And of course, needless to say, I was hoping to gain marketing experience. And with the particular tasks that I was assigned, I was also hoping to gain a little experience in video editing and managing a YouTube channel. I also got an opportunity to apply skills that I learned in SASAH, specifically HTML and CSS. And it seems to be a running theme in both of my internships, but again, communication. I wanted to gain the ability to have prompt and effective communication, not just with my supervisor, but with the rest of the team. And my main tasks at this internship included attending team meetings to brainstorm the marketability of films, uploading new videos to YouTube, to the FCFF YouTube channel, and organizing their playlists so that visitors would see the newest and most relevant content, putting together video montages and trailers for the event and the upcoming festival, creating title cards for the award ceremony, and also when the FCFF website launched the 2020 update, I was asked to proofread the site to make sure that everything was displaying as it should. There were a lot more challenges than I expected, and I don't think I have time to cover all of them today, but I was able to narrow them down to about 3. The biggest one was there was a very steep learning curve. I had 0 experience in marketing, and so it was really intimidating when I first joined the table. Students were bringing in such fresh ideas for the marketability of films, and I could really only think about the critical analysis or kind of the artistic aspect of a film rather than thinking about marketability. So I had to switch gears for that. And Adobe Premiere, which is the software I use to edit my videos, it was something that I just happened to pick up over the summer during the self-isolation days out of sheer boredom and curiosity as well. And so I was really not at all familiar with it, and I lacked experience. Again, communication, the peak of the festival coincided with the peak of my midterm season. So that was when it became really difficult to maintain clear and consistent communication. And the nature of my job sometimes required that I worked alone. For example, video editing. And I think that was a challenge because it was difficult to keep up morale sometimes or stay motivated when I felt a little disconnected from the rest of the team. But again, despite all these challenges, I feel like I did gain a lot of valuable experience from this internship. I gained marketing perspective, which has been really useful to me in my current position. I'm working through work study as a content creator for Western Student Experience blog. It's called Thrive Online, for those of you who haven't heard of it, shamelessly plugging. But yeah, I always need to be coming up with new original content that will engage students. So this has been really helpful for that. And I also got an inside look at a film festival, which isn't something that you come across every day. And it really consolidated my desire to work in an arts-related industry, even if the job itself isn't artistic or creative. It also gave me an opportunity to sharpen old skills, such as HTML and CSS. And last but not least, I became very familiar with Adobe Premiere by the end of my internship. My final project actually was to create a short video with no guidelines from their end to promote FCFF's work. And it was optional, but I really wanted to challenge myself to put my learning to the test. So I did make this 4-minute video clip. I know there are no photos of me working at my job in this presentation, as is the norm. That was because it was, both internships were remotely done. I was in my pajamas during all of my work hours, and if I was in a meeting, I was in half pajamas. And I figured no one wanted to really see that, but if there's time, I would love to show my last project, the final 4-minute video, just to show you guys kind of the progress that I made throughout this internship and the final product. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. And if there are any questions, I would love to answer them now.
So Jen, does Hanby still have a little more time to show a bit of the video, or should we move along?
Her 6 or 7 minutes are up, and I'm sorry, the alarm went off, but I don't know if it was heard. Okay, so I'll try turning it.
Sorry, I didn't hear the alarm.
So Hanby, unfortunately, we'll have to forego the seeing a clip of your video. Do you want to unshare your screen now, please? Yeah. Thanks. And we do have.
We can post your video though, Hanby.
Okay, I will do that.
Yeah.
Oops, that's not it.
Thanks, Hanby. And we do have a question. I won't identify all the questioners necessarily, but our Dean Michael Mildy is here and has asked if, Hanby, could you say what was the most important lesson you learned about communication, about the importance of communication, and maybe can you say what you think counts as good communication?
Sure. That's a really good question. Actually, this whole process, I wrote a really long thing in my reflections about communication and just kind of what I found to be the most challenging. I think the most important lesson that I learned is to be prompt and concise and as clear as one can be. I think with remote working, it's hard to always know exactly what to say when you're on call, and then after the fact you realize you have all these questions, but I think it's good to just convey them as best you can on the spot, rather than kind of like trying to figure things out on your own and then causing a bigger problem later on. Also just yeah, even if it's just shooting them a reply, letting them know that you saw the message but you just don't have time in the moment to reply, I think that also gives them a good heads up so that they know that at least you've seen it, rather than them just wondering, you know, did they get the task that I asked them to do? I think all those things were really important things that I learned. What counts as good communication? Yeah, like I said, just being clear, and also I think maintaining kind of a voice of, I don't know, just like encouragement throughout all of the communication that's going on, because this is kind of like a difficult time to be working together with different people. And so I think that's a good way to like boost morale within your team. If you're always kind of starting your emails off with like a hope you had a great week, or, you know, something along those lines.
Great. Thanks, Hamby. We had one other question, but it disappeared, and I think the person is just helping keep us on track.
Okay.
I think with that, we will wrap it up, unless anybody has a brief question. Anybody on screen has a brief question? The other thing we like to do at SASAH is keep to our word of no more than 10 minutes total. So our second speaker, thanks again, Hanby. I guess we can all give this kind of clap. So now I'm going to introduce Veronica Burdick, who's speaking about both Iconoclast and also the London Children's Connection. So Veronica.
Hello, everyone. Is everything working all good here? Cool, thank you. So my name is Veronica, and I'm a fourth-year SASAH student. I'm also double majoring in MIT, and today I'll be talking about my experiences with the London Children's Connection and Iconoclast. So I'm going to work backwards a little bit. My second internship / credit was with the London Children's Connection. This was a before and after school program tailored towards schools around London, ages kindergarten to around grade 3 or 4, anyone who would need after school or before school support. And so my job specifically there was as a supply teacher. I had about 15 schools on my availability around London through my accessible bus route from Western. I would be called in at around 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. for the morning shifts, or 3:30 to 5:30. So this was really good because I could still manage to do lectures during the day and have a sort of fun 2-hour break and distraction at the end or before the day. I purposely highlighted programming because this, the London Children's Connection is more than just a babysitting or having the kids run around for 2 hours until their parents come. The LCC really focused on creating engaging programming that would sort of expand on the academic learning the kids were already doing while keeping them entertained and fun and safe. And so our tangible results were, I would say, pretty much every day because we were playing. The very first day we started our training, it honestly was just 2 hours of playing, and we played with different materials, and we talked, I guess, as adults, as responsible adults, after how this type of play helped students learning, if they preferred to work independently, if they preferred in groups. And then every day, starting once I started the shift, we finished our story of learning. So as pictured here, the LCC really worked on expanding on the play, not changing the play, because kids have very broad imaginations. It isn't very helpful to throw them different toys and different activities Monday through Friday. Instead, we kept them going on one project to keep them engaged, to keep them excited to come back to LCC after school. And so the We Notice, We Wonder, and Let's Try, the first thing was we noticed what the kids were playing with. So for example, we noticed they're playing with trains. We wonder what would happen if we broke the trains up into 2 different teams, or if we brought it outside. How can we play with water, with sand, and all these different ways we could keep them engaged with the train. And then Let's Try was a prompt for the next day. Let's try bringing the train outside. Let's try painting it or using paint or another craft, just so everyone can still be engaged depending on what sort of physical stimulation they like. My goals and outcomes. So in all transparency, SASAH definitely helped me get this credit. It was the 3rd year resume building portion of our class. We had to sort of apply to, not really apply to a job that interests us, but I ended up applying for it anyway. And then 3 days later, I was actually filling out my availability in my contract. So that worked out so well. Another goal was to become familiar with London. So like I said, between these 15 schools, I was getting a good understanding of the bus routes beyond just from Nat side to Ontario Hall. As well, I wanted to get into the school environment without being a teacher. So I definitely worked alongside teachers themselves and students who are working on completing their teacher's degree. And overall just playing. I'd worked at summer camp for years before, and as much as it's being an adult and being responsible, a lot of it is just tuning into our childhood and playing and having fun. So some of my outcomes were a diverse understanding of culture and play. So like I said, we really worked on expanding the play and not changing. And they really emphasize avoiding plastic toys. And I know this is very specific, but it stuck with me. So let's say you had a plastic taco, for example. Unfortunately, this taco only represents a stereotypical idea of what a taco can be, versus if we used a stick or a rock, these things are sustainable, they're reusable. It is not only a rock, it's not only a taco, it could be a chair, it could be a wand, it could be so many different things, and it just, it helps children, it helps us sort of keep programming going without having to buy 1,000 different things and promoting a certain ideological stereotype of what a certain object could be. As well, I got a good understanding of the effects of language, and I learned this from one of my supervisors. She really was emphasizing putting the onus of responsibility and decision-making on the students instead of the supervisors, us saying, oh, get down from that, or careful, that's dangerous. She would always ask, is this a smart choice? So then the child would reflect themselves and ask themselves, oh, should I be standing on this wobbly chair? As well, I think all of us, especially when we're in a panic, we're really quick to yell out, careful, careful, careful. So this word gets oversaturated in the mind, especially in kindergarten. They're always doing things that are not careful. But instead she asked, notice how that chair is slippery when you stand on it, or wobbly when you stand on it. Notice how these rocks are sharp. So instead the child takes on to themselves to make the choice to be careful instead of us just yelling it all the time. And finally, another outcome was I got a good understanding of the Child Care in Early Years Act and how the LCC used it. So that's just how many supervisors per children, how much physical activity, when to feed them snacks, what to do in an emergency. These are all sorts of things that I think are applicable in any sort of working environment in the future. My next and still current sort of experiential learning experience is with Iconoclast. This is an on-campus magazine funded by the Arts and Humanities and SASAH. We release a publication every semester, so it's biannual. I joined in my second year as an assistant director and have now been working as co-director. As a director, I oversee the hiring, the theme brainstorming, events, graphics, finance, and the submissions. I have to say the submissions are my favorite part because I'm just so impressed always at the greater Western community and everything they have to offer. My tangible results are 3 amazing magazines. We had our launch party last night. I'm just so proud of how it all came together, especially remotely over Zoom. I could not be more proud of how that one came out. And I got to go quickly with this one. Overall, it was a good creative outlet. And I guess we could just read through the rest of them, but I do want to leave with one big outcome I got from both of my internships is just confidence. I think a lot of us might be able to relate. We get so caught up in, oh, I should ask my supervisor, is this right? And we're not really sure when to take risks. But a lot of the time you will be right. And that's something I've learned. And just 8 out of 10 times, do what you want to do. You will get the go ahead from your supervisor and have the personal flavor. So I leave you with thinking of 5 things you're proud of, because we get so caught up in if we're doing it right or wrong that we forget to notice how far we've actually come up until this point. So thank you so much for your attention, and we'll wrap that up there.
Thank you, Veronica. That was great. And we do have one question actually from Rebecca Jackson. I am identifying people. Rebecca is in the 4th year as well. So she asked, did you ever struggle with the expanding, not changing narrative? How did you expand while still letting the children really use their imagination and develop their own ideas?
That's a good question. I think once you tap into this child mindset, it gets very, very easy, because I found myself engaged in them just as much as I hope the kindergartners were. So I really felt like a 7-year-old, and I was wondering myself, really, I wonder how this train could be. What if we did it by heights? And a lot of the time, even if we had set a goal for the We Wonder or Let's Try for a Tuesday or Wednesday, a lot of the time the kids would come back in on Tuesday and be like, oh, can we continue what we were doing yesterday? So we actually had more things planned than we're actually following through, because it was only 2 hours. The kids were just sometimes so engaged in like this one version of it that we didn't have to expand until maybe the next week. So we always had like a portfolio running in case we needed to.
Great, thank you. We probably have time for another question if there is one. I will fill time for a second and first of all congratulate you on the Iconoclast launch. I popped in last night and was really impressed with the programming that was going on. I also wanted to acknowledge, which I should have done at the beginning, and Hanby did a good job of reminding us, that of course a lot of this work has been happening in atypical ways. A lot of these internships are happening online, and Barb's work, the work of the supervisors, is all adapted, of course. And so that's a kind of meta reality that is not so meta some days, I know. I think we're probably at the point where we should wrap it up. So thank you again, Ronnie. That was great. So we're moving on to hear from Sarah Charette, and Sarah's speaking about the Spirits exhibition at Satellite Gallery.
Yes, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Ronnie and Hanby. Great presentations. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Okay. Oh. Can everyone see that? Yep. Okay. So as Patrick said, I am Sarah Charette, and I will be talking about my exhibition Spirits, held at Satellite Project Space from August 26th to September 5th, 2020. So after hearing about the possibilities available through the self-designed project for the Experiential Learning credit, I immediately knew that I wanted to create my own exhibition, given that my other major is art history and museum studies. So the conceptualization for this exhibition actually began back in 2011 when my maternal grandmother, Eileen Garland, seen in the photograph here, passed away, and my mother inherited her rather large collection of photographs. While sorting through stacks of photo envelopes, I found the Black's envelope seen in the image on the left, opened it, and I did not recognize in any of the photographs a single person as a relative or any of the backdrops as being from Eileen's or anyone else's house that I knew. So I asked my mother about them, and she told me that Eileen had found the negatives in one of the bedrooms when she moved into her home at 1113 Aldea Avenue in Ottawa. This was in August of 1988. She had them developed, and she kept them for over 20 years. So this is a small sampling of some of the 24 photographs, including some of my favorites. So this found photograph collection really brings up notions of familiarity, memory, voyeurism, and distance, along with questions about Eileen's motivations for keeping the photos for over 20 years. So this was the jumping off point for this exhibition. So the exhibition planning process officially began after I received approval from Barbara Bruce and Patrick Mann for my basic idea. And after Dr. Kirsty Robertson from the Department of Visual Arts agreed to be my supervisor, we met regularly to discuss the particulars of the exhibition. Dr. Robertson suggested that I schedule meetings to discuss funding the exhibition with Dr. John Hatch, who is the undergraduate chair in the Department of Visual Arts, and of course, Patrick Mann, head of SASAH. And between both of these meetings, I was generously given a budget of $425. On January 16th, Erica DeFreitas did a talk in the Art Now speaker series, and I immediately knew that I wanted her artwork in the show, as the themes of memory, family, and detachment fit really well with what I was going for. So together, Dr. Robertson and I developed an introduction email and a professional contract, and we sent it to her and received a resounding yes, which was amazing. We agreed that Satellite Project Space was the best place to host this show, given its size and the availability afforded by the SASAH program. So I sent an exhibition proposal to Eva Sivanen, manager at Satellite, and was put on a calendar to start installation on April 13th. Then, of course, my project was put on hold in March. However, I received an email from Patrick on April 24th offering to put on the show later in the summer. So immediately I said yes. I was so excited to get the opportunity to actually complete this exhibition as I had planned. Of course, it was a lot of work. For the next month, I spent upwards of about 6 hours a day on my computer. I reached out to Dr. Robertson, who was out of the province, but was able to help me via email and Zoom. I contacted Dr. Hatch and Jen Tramble and ensured that I still had my funding. And of course, I reached out to Erica as well. I also discussed details with scheduling and the new safety procedures in place at Satellite with Eva to make sure that all of that was good. But the publication was really the part that took the longest. It consisted of finding the right aesthetic theme, formatting each of the 24 pages with images and text, and ensuring that I had enough room for Dr. Robertson's foreword, Erica's bio, and my admittedly extensive catalog essay. So the next hurdle was planning and executing the exhibition's installation. I was given August 24th and 25th for installation and September 6th for deinstallation, and then the Wednesdays to Saturdays in between for the show to be open. So my partner Trevor and I arrived at Satellite on the Monday morning at 9 a.m. and began setting up plinths and projectors. We began painting movable walls, which you can see Trevor doing in those middle images, and painting the title wall with my handmade stencils. Tuesday involved setting up lighting, measuring and hanging photographs, and sticking up the vinyl lettering. This lettering was generously donated to me by Ruth Skinner from Art Lab. She cut, weeded, masked, and hand-delivered it to us at the gallery, which was amazing. So at the end of the day on Tuesday, right before we were set to leave, I went to stick the vinyl lettering on the wall, and the masking paper slipped out of my hand, folded over onto itself, and effectively ruined the entire 3x2 foot sheet and all of my explanatory text for the exhibition. So after a few unpleasant words, I frantically emailed Ruth. The exhibition was set to open the next day at 2 p.m. and she was able to have the replacement vinyl ready right by noon. So that gave me just enough time to painstakingly install it, as you can see in the far right image. And I will say it was very rewarding to see it up on the show after all of the frustration of the day before. The lighting was also tricky and took a little bit of extra work on opening day. So this involved moving and climbing a ladder, angling and changing out lights, as there were two different colors of lighting. There was one warmer and one cooler. So the left two images were taken at the beginning of opening day and the right two were taken at the end. So you can definitely see the change in the brightness and the evenness of the lighting. It took a lot of work. As well, lighting was especially important for Erica's section of the exhibition, as the two video projections that she gave required darkness, but her print set required lighting. So a single focus spotlight with all of the other lights turned off allowed for a unique display of her print series, which actually worked really well given that they had very intimate kind of themes. I will say that the photos don't really necessarily do this area justice. It was quite a difference from the first part of the gallery, and it really created the intended effect. So alongside working in the physical gallery space, I also got to create advertising and social media images for the show, which were used on Satellite social media and advertising through SASAH and the Department of Visual Arts. So these are some examples, with the far left image also being the printed poster for the show. The advertising seemed to work, as I totaled 22 visitors to the gallery across the 8 days that it was open. It might not sound like a lot, but considering that Satellite's capacity was only 3 visitors at the time, 22 definitely exceeded my expectations. This smaller capacity disallowed for an in-person reception, which I will say was good for my budget, but instead I decided to host a virtual closing reception, which was not as highly attended as I had hoped, but still involved some really great conversation with people in attendance. As well as a final record of this project, I created a digital archive of the show, including a description of the concept, a link to a PDF of the catalog, images of the exhibition fully installed, and detailed scans of all 24 images. So I'm going to post this link in the chat afterwards if anyone wants to take a look. So though there were some bumps in the road, I was so happy to complete this exhibition even in the midst of the pandemic. Not only did I learn a lot about exhibition making from conceptualization all the way up to deinstallation, I really learned a significant amount about myself. And I will say it was really life-affirming to complete a project in my field and enjoy it as much as I did with this. I'm so humbled by the positive response that I received for this project, and I'm so grateful to the SASAH program for giving me the opportunity to complete this exhibition. So I think that's it. I'm not sure where my time sits. I didn't hear an alarm. I'm sorry if I went a little too fast there, but.
You're good, Sarah. You hit your 7 minutes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah.
I'll stop sharing here.
Sure. So we have time for a question or two if anybody would like to step up. Maybe I will. So Sarah, sometimes when I'm trying to explain to people what a curator does, if they seem to have more awareness of literature, I'll say, well, it can be a bit like being an editor. And so that's sort of a very shorthand definition, but I wonder if you have anything to add to how you think of the role of the curator, like what's most important maybe.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I think that communication is incredibly important, kind of mirroring some of the things that Hanbi said, but being the curator is kind of like being the puppet master. You have to keep all the things moving, and you have to make sure that everything is working at the right time and that everything comes together in the end. So being able to communicate things to people and do it in a way that is respectful, but also kind of gives the urgency or gives the necessary message is really, really important. So for example, there were issues with mailing, and I had to contact Erica. And of course, I was very intimidated to be dealing with such a well-established artist. She was lovely, but it was still just very intimidating. And so I had to contact her and express that I was a little bit worried, but I didn't want to sound like I was being accusatory. And so the being able to communicate, I think, is kind of the most important tool for a curator. But I think that also being flexible is really important. As I described, there were definitely some times when things didn't go to plan, and being able to roll with the punches and really keep moving instead of, you know, stopping and freaking out is really, really important, to kind of put it in layman's terms, I guess.
Great, thank you. I don't know, is there any further questions? I think we should probably wrap it up there. I will say that I saw the exhibition with my body, and it was really beautiful to see the very intimate and strange photographs in that space. So thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you so much.
Okay, so we're going to now hear from Sarah Collins, and Sarah Collins is talking about Art for All Kids, and I think this is a separate project and YMCA Southwestern Ontario School Age Program. So welcome, Sarah.
Hello. All right. So I'm Sarah. I'm talking about my experiences at Arts for All Kids and the YMCA. So Arts for All Kids is a program that provides free arts classes to children from low-income families. And so I worked as a volunteer creative writing teacher for them. And I had 2 classes, about 45 minutes long each, with approximately 10 students. And I had never done anything like this. I've never done any kind of teaching before. I didn't have a lot of experience in childcare. So this was something that I was just trying out. I wasn't really planning on pursuing teaching as a career or anything at this point, but that would definitely change later on. So my work involved planning and delivering lessons and activities to the kids. So I had a lot of kind of like free reign with this. I had a bit of a curriculum to work with, but it was a lot more, I guess, suggestions and not necessarily like hard and fast rules. So I definitely had a lot of creativity. And again, like I said, I didn't have a lot of experience with this kind of thing. So it was a lot of trial and error to kind of come up with things that would keep the kids engaged. So my structure was usually doing like a little exercise at the beginning, like something like the word of the day, for example, where I'd put like a really big word on the board and we'd have to kind of define it and use it in a sentence, things like that. And then I would do like a little lesson, and then I would have an activity or like a project at the end that they could work on for several weeks. So an example of one of the assignments that I gave was they had to write a story based on the Harris Burdick mystery, which the story goes, for those of you who don't know, it was like a writer named Harris Burdick who wrote a bunch of children's stories, but then was never seen or heard from again. And all we have left are these images from each of his stories that have a title and a caption that go with them. So for example, this one is called Mr. Linden's Library, and the caption reads, "He had warned her about the book, and now it was too late." Or this one, which is one of my favorites, called The 7 Chairs, and the caption is, "The 5th one ended up in France." And so all of the images are like this. They're very imagination provoking. And so the idea is to write a story based on the image, like the story that you think would have gone along with the image and the caption. And so the kids had a lot of fun with this. I actually can't take credit for this project. I kind of stole it from my grade 4 English teacher, because I remember doing it when I was in grade 4, and I had so much fun, and I just thought it was the greatest project. So yeah, so I used it for this project as well, and they really loved it. So after working with Arts for All Kids, I became really interested in childcare and teaching. So I got a job with the YMCA and working in the before and after school program. So I was at one school, St. Sebastian, and so this is my third year working there. So I started working in second year, and I'm still working there now. So I work from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning, and then 3 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon on every weekday. So that's where I'll be going after this too. And so my job is to plan and deliver interest-based programming and activities. So that means programming that is, so I take stock of children's interests and then try to deliver programming that is centered around that, and also participate in play-based learning. So the YMCA really values what they call learning through play. So a lot of the activities that I'm coming up with are supposed to be fun. They're not supposed to feel like school, but at the same time, I have to be aware of the kinds of things that I want the children to take away from the activities, whether that's learning like writing skills or even just something like conflict resolution. And also a large part of my job is also to participate in the activities. So it's not just setting up and then walking away and supervising from afar, but really being engaged in the activities with the children and playing with them and being part of that learning process. So this is an example of a program plan. So every week I have to write one of these, and it just logs all the different activities that we did that week. So I have like a quota of all the different activities that I need to have done for like by Friday afternoon. So for example, on this one we had we were making a welcome board for our classroom. So this is it. We got all the kids to make little Bitmoji avatars of themselves, and we made a welcome board. So this was kind of what we were looking at with this was like self-esteem and identity formation and things like that. So as they created their little Bitmoji. So this one's me right here, by the way. And this is my like on the job photo. I want to include this just to talk about like the participatory and interest-based aspects of my work. So this year for Halloween, this is me and my coworker, because the kids really this year are really into detectives and police work and investigating crimes. So we were trying to think of a way to incorporate all the PPE that we have to wear into our costume. So this is what we came up with. I had the idea of being forensic investigators for Halloween. So yeah, this is us looking super cool. And this is a bunch of props that I brought. And so I brought a little jar of flour and some paintbrushes, and I taught the kids how to dust for fingerprints. And so then we just like spent the afternoon dusting for fingerprints all over the school, which the custodian wasn't super happy about because there was flour everywhere, but we had a lot of fun. I also want to talk about a few other important aspects of my work that are maybe not necessarily unique to my school, but are maybe more specific to my school. So one of the things that I do, they're not really, this isn't stuff that's really in my job description, but it's stuff that I deal with like day to day. So I work a lot of the time one-on-one with children who need extra support, which I'm actually really proud of because I have zero formal training in working with kids with special needs, but here I am working with these children and trying to do the best that I can to give them that support. And I also, what goes along with that is working with teachers and the support staff and kind of developing different strategies and methods that we can make sure that those students are going to be successful in our program and in school. And lastly, I also provide a safe space for children from struggling families. And this is a big one at our school because we have a lot of children that are struggling outside of school with family issues. We've got a lot of kids, we have a few kids that we know for a fact don't get enough food to eat. We have kids that have very unique family situations, a lot of kind of different custody issues. We've got children that have been removed from one or in some cases both of their parents for legal reasons. We had a child last year who lived with a violent family member, and we ended up actually having to call child services because he was actually afraid to go home. So this part of my job is really hard, and it's hard to know that there's only so much that I can do for these kids. And yeah, so providing that safe space where they can feel valued for at least like 5 hours out of the day is really important, because I know that it's not something that they necessarily all get at home. And I just want to talk a little bit about the outcomes to finish up. So I learned a lot about classroom management and just teaching in general, and a lot about behavior management, especially at my school now. And I've met so many different personalities and so many different behaviors, and have a lot of experience working with many different learners. And I've developed an interest in working specifically with underserved children and children from communities that have an economic disadvantage. And it's something that I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I want to work towards in the future as well. Like whatever career path I end up going down, I definitely want to be aware of these like disadvantaged communities and how I can help. And yeah, that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? I have one brief question, and it might seem perhaps not super important, but I'm impressed with the way you use language about what you're doing, and I mean in a way that feels natural, but you're also using terminology that's subjective, seems inclusive. And I wonder if you could say something about that. Was that something that was comfortable for you right off the bat? Because it does strike me that a big part of doing this kind of work is also the way you understand it and represent it in the community.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Yeah, I find that like our school has a bit of a reputation for being rough. So like a lot of the Y staff from other schools kind of know our school and know that our school is rough, and it's hard to get supply staff to come to our school because they're scared of us a little bit. And I've heard people say before that our school has all the bad kids, and at first like I kind of agree with that, and then now like I don't know, it hurts to hear that, because the more I work with these kids, the more I know that they're not bad kids. They're just in a very, very bad situation, right? And so, and I feel like it's my job as a Y staff not to just like write them off as bad kids, but to actually do what I can to help support them and to get them out of that bad situation someday. So yeah, it's definitely, I think it's just the mindset. Instead of looking at them as bad kids, looking at them as kids that just need extra support. And I think that the language really helps to like wrap your mind around that.
And Sierra had a question, Patrick.
Oh, please go ahead. Oh,
yeah, sorry, I just put it in the chat as well. But I'm just wondering if you could speak to how you've seen your role evolve since like the introduction of COVID. It seems you've been working before and then now have to do all that, and maybe especially in like a school where there might be some like difficulties for students, and how that you've made that transition.
Yeah, COVID has not been super fun, like with all the PPE and just like all the extra cleaning and stuff. And I think that, I mean, we do what we can, but at the end of the day, like kids are going to be kids, right? Like, we've got 4-year-olds that just like wear their mask in their mouth, and you're like, okay, well, defeats the purpose, but whatever. So I think a lot of the time, yeah, like there's a lot of public health rules that we kind of have to follow, but a lot of the time and especially because, sometimes like all a kid needs, like when they're upset, is just like a nice tight hug, right? Whereas like I can't do that now. So trying to find other ways of like supporting them, especially kids that have difficulty like with math and everything. Like there's some kids that have a lot of difficulty like recognizing emotions. So if they can't see your face, then it's really difficult. So yeah, definitely using a lot more like language, because before, like if a kid was misbehaving, sometimes I'd be like, okay, do I look happy right now? Why don't I look happy? So if they could kind of like work through like, okay, this is an emotion that I'm seeing, this is why this is happening. Whereas now it's just using a lot more language and not so much relying on facial expressions. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that that's had to change since COVID, but yeah, it's just, yeah, it's working through it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. That was excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to have one more presentation, and then we'll take a very brief break just to give everybody a short breather. So we're going to hear now from Francesca DeNoble, who's talking about Bright Spark Tours and also her work with Arts and Humanities Dean's Office.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Awesome. All right, is everyone able to see that? Amazing, thank you. So as Patrick mentioned, my name is Francesca, and for my experiential learning credit, I was lucky enough to do 2 separate projects. My first was Community Engaged Learning with Brightspark Canada, a renowned travel company that specializes in educational tours for elementary and high school students. 4 years ago, I traveled to New York City on a Brightspark tour, and 30 minutes into knowing my tour leader, Anna, I knew that I wanted her job one day. Though the job sounds like pure fun, being an educational tour leader requires a lot of hard work, and Brightspark had one of the most rigorous hiring processes that I had ever encountered. After multiple rounds of interviews, full weekends of training, and week-long destination trips, it was then my job to memorize centuries of Canadian history and become a local in places that I had never lived. Unlike regular tour guides, Brightspark tour leaders travel with their groups front to back rather than remain in one destination. This means early mornings boarding coach buses with upwards of 40 students and 14-hour drives to Quebec City. This also means eating lunch at en routes 4 times a week and surviving off of sour gummy worms and vitamin water. And no, I am not allowed to sleep on the bus. In between name games and fun activities, you can find me spieling on historical sites along the 401. After all, our job is to use travel to make learning fun for students while always encouraging them to go, discover, inspire. 10 tours in 10 consecutive weeks brought me 12,890 kilometers of travel, 155 hours spent in transit, and 344 students transported across the province, and not once did I catch a cold. I assure you that one of the greatest challenges of this job is staying hydrated. This is a sample itinerary from one of my trips to Quebec City. While my biggest focus at work is to ensure my group's safety, I also want to guarantee that in between our many stops, they're all feeling happy and well rested by maintaining constant communication. One of the most spectacular things about the job is the connections you make on tour. Between making confirmation calls with hotel vendors and restaurant managers, or befriending the teachers that I'm touring with, being in constant contact with professionals forced me to professionalize myself and ensure that I was also putting Brightspark's best foot forward. And though I'm ultimately responsible for the success of the tour, my supervisors were always just a phone call away. The backup was there if I needed it, but they always had enough faith in me that I could execute tours effectively, and I think this faith is what really allowed me to excel. However, perhaps my favorite part of the job was making friends with dozens of new students each week, and certainly the added Instagram followers did not hurt. I went into this job with a passion for travel and a desire to see new places. Though I knew I would be leaving with memories that would last a lifetime, I was not prepared for how strong this job would make me. Amidst all of the good, there's always going to be a little bit of bad. I have been yelled at by students, stopped others from crying, argued with suppliers through a language barrier, been left completely invalidated by my superiors, narrowly avoided a concussion, and cried a fair bit. But honestly, I laughed a whole lot more. I learned to see these instances, of course, not as setbacks, but challenges. I finished up my season with a deeper appreciation for travel, improved leadership and problem-solving skills, a heck of a lot more confidence in public speaking, and a pretty solid knack for group management, because getting 50 13-year-olds to all be quiet at the same time can really suck. Had I not been given the opportunity to turn this experience into an internship credit, I'm not sure that I would have found the same amount of value in it. Looking at Brightspark through an interdisciplinary lens has helped me really shape my experience. And as grateful as I am for the opportunity to work the job that I have wanted for so long, I am filled with more pride than gratitude for going out and getting exactly what I wanted. My second project, on the other hand, was an entire 180 from the first. For this half of my credit, I completed an internship through Western and worked in the Dean's Office of Arts and Humanities for the Alumni Relations and Development Department. At the time of my application, I truly believed organization and time management to be the most essential skills in getting the job done. With previous experience in alumni relations from my job on Students' Council, I was hoping this internship would give me professional and office experience that would teach me to conduct proper research. I was fortunate enough to work directly under Jessica Shagirl, Arts and Humanities Alumni Relations Officer, who focuses on strengthening the relationships between the Dean's Office and former Arts and Humanities graduates. The main focus of my work with Jessica was fundraising. Western alumni are responsible for a large percentage of the school's donations, and it is these donations that enable the university to keep providing some of the best opportunities available for students. A significant portion of Jessica's job involves researching and reaching out to prospective donors, and it would be my job to keep the ball rolling with an extra set of hands. I underwent several weeks of software training to learn one of the university's most valuable databases, Blackbaud. Due to the confidential nature of the work I was doing involving many different names and dollar signs, I am unable to provide photos, but Blackbaud and LinkedIn quickly became my new best friends. Though Jessica would provide me with leads, my work also required me to be researching on my own time, trying to find potential donors by assessing factors such as their relationship to the faculty, their career status, and quite frankly, wealth. Each month, discovery goals were made that Microsoft Excel would help me keep track of. In between my own research and outreach, I acted as an assistant to Jessica in helping her schedule in-person meetings with prospects. Between learning the new database, meeting her on a weekly basis, as you can see, and scheduling an obscene amount of emails, I also got to get hands-on with some of the faculty. The Visual Arts Center is currently undergoing some renovations in the hopes of putting together a brand new digital creativity lab, a large-scale project that requires close to $1.5 million in donations in order for it to become a reality. And Jessica was awesome enough to frequently let me tag along on consultations to discuss this project. Did you know that a lot of people will pay a lot of money to have their name on a building or a room, and the value of that room changes depending on how frequently it's used or foot traffic that takes place outside of it? Because I sure didn't when I started. Jessica gave me the tools that I needed to be both helpful to her and successful in reaching my own personal goals of professionalization. She was always available, always answering my many, many questions. And she also let me take on a lot more responsibility than I initially thought myself capable, including contacting high-profile alumni such as Sarah Richardson from HGTV, an interior design queen. And though I did leave this job with improved time management skills and a better way of organizing my time, what I did not expect was the practice of a flexible schedule and self-motivated work. Jessica and I met weekly, but a lot of my work was conducted remotely, and this forced me to keep myself accountable by setting aside time to do my outreach in order to meet that month's discovery goals. Frequent emails and phone calls to prospects provided a lot of opportunity for me to communicate in a professional environment, and while I certainly did make some outside of Western connections, I also found an interest in a potential career after university. Presently, I'm using a lot of the skills I developed during this internship in my part-time sales job. From tracking outreach to hitting goals, speaking confidently on the phone, and learning to keep myself motivated, my time in the Dean's office with Jessica has given me tangible results that I know will continue to take me far beyond my time at Western. Thank you.
Bravo, Francesca, thank you. So, do we have some questions from either the audience beyond us or the audience on panel?
I will. Francesca, hi, great presentation, thank you. What about, have either of these experiences impacted on your ideas for your career path?
Absolutely. So Bright Sparks certainly had a large impact when I did that last summer. Obviously, that was not running for me this year because of COVID, but my intention was absolutely to return this year for a second tour season and maybe, eventually become higher up in the company. Now that I have found a way to essentially get paid for traveling, I definitely want to explore that in the future. And it also helped me realize that I kind of do like working with kids. So not something that I expected, but as much of a headache as 40 adolescents can be, they're also a lot of fun. And so it's actually helped me. I went on to get like my ESL certificate because I think that's another way that in the future I can make money on the side, work with children, and travel. And then, as I mentioned, with the Dean's Office internship, that certainly helped me in just so many aspects where, like I said, I'm currently working in sales actually, and that showed me a lot of things that I, A, would not thought of, like that I was good at in the first place, and B, that I was not interested in. So I guess fundamentally it helped me realized that I do want to be working like with people in perhaps a sales position or with children, or maybe a bit of both, because I think I do best when I'm just surrounded by others.
Maybe I'll follow. Oh, we have Sarah Charette, please.
I mean, this is kind of just I don't know, kind of a simple question, but out of you said you listed 4 places that you traveled. What would you say was like the most interesting thing that you learned, or like the most enjoyable kind of place that you went? Like, did you have a favorite, or?
Yeah, so my favorite tour destination was Quebec City, which I was really surprised at, actually, because I do not speak French. I really heavily relied on Duolingo. But it's just so historic, and I had never been there prior to Bright Spark training. And I think it was just kind of baffling to stand in a place that, you know, has been around for 400 to 500 years, and to look at all, you know, like admittedly, some of it was awful, the history, obviously, which was really interesting to get to share with these kids in a curriculum that when I was in elementary school, we were not learning the truth about Indigenous relations in Canada. So getting to share that with them, it really helped, and standing in those spaces really helped me contextualize what I was trying to get across.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to introduce Samantha Henderson-Wally, who is talking about her experience at Hull & Hull Law Firm. Sam.
Hi, so I'm Sam, as Patrick just said, and over the summer I participated in a remote internship at Hull & Hull. Hull & Hull is an estate litigation firm in Toronto, which essentially means that they represent beneficiaries in the event of a will challenge. I had originally planned to work longer and of course in person, but amazingly my employer was able to accommodate for my internship to consist of remote work. I have worked at Hull & Hull before in the summer of 2018 and 2019, and so I thought I had a good idea of what to expect. However, the remote work setup was very different from what I had in mind. I knew that this part of my internship would be, I would be given my own project to work on, so I went into this experience with the goal of becoming independent and developing critical thinking and communication skills. However, this year was very different from my previous work experiences in that although I had a supervisor, I did have less guidance than I've had in previous years. I was also missing that networking and interpersonal aspect of work. On the left-hand side of this slide, you can see a picture from the Hull & Hull Synergy Room, which is basically one big space where everybody in the office works at the same time. So going from that to me alone at my kitchen table was a bit of an adjustment. Although I will say we did get the opportunity to network once a week on our firm Zoom trivia nights, which were a great way to establish working relationships during social distancing protocols. So I was set up with a remote desktop, which gave me access to files, correspondence, and client documents. In estates files, most of the parties involved are family, so files typically contain a family tree, a synopsis of which position each family member has taken on the matter at hand, and a detailed catalog of notes from meetings, emails, property assessments, bank statements, all copies, original and revised, of the will, and a client history. My designated project for my internship was to digitize a comprehensive chart containing all relevant information for a specific file. The chart was meant to serve as an informative guide for a judge to review at trial. This digitization was a new practice during the pandemic, as court documents and materials provided by legal representation have all been typically hard copies in the past. However, throughout the pandemic, many of the court hearings were held over Zoom, and in anticipation of that, lawyers started to find new ways to provide their documents. So the case that I was given was for a passing accounts, which is an audit of monetary transactions in and out of an estate that is usually requested by a beneficiary or trustee in order to ensure that the funds are being used as directed by the will and are not being misused. This specific passing accounts was really complex because there were 2 objecting parties rather than 1, and each had multiple objections. So the first objector was a fellow family member and a beneficiary, but the second was a trust company involved with the estate accounts. So to get me started on the project, I had a few conference calls with Natalia Angelini, who acted as my supervisor for the project, since this was her case that I was working on, and she directed me as to what information would be necessary how the information should be categorized, by subject and then subcategorized by date, for example, and where to include the hyperlinks. So typically original client documents, scanned copies of letters, wills, birth certificates, all of those things are tabbed. And so when the documents are submitted as hard copies, judges would have a chart detailing the entire legal history of the case that references the client documents by tabs that were physically attached. And so this first step of my job was to make sure that each reference to a tab was hyperlinked to the actual client documents. After that, it was a matter of creating prototypes for different versions of the charts, all organized by different categories so that Natalia could make the executive decision of which chart would be the most useful for a judge. I did have some creative freedom for this. I was able to propose a few different styles of presentation, and it was definitely a process of trial and error. This was really useful in developing my critical thinking skills. I had weekly phone call check-ins with Natalia. We would send the charts back and forth and chat about them at the start of each week. These calls were really useful. It admittedly took me a long time to feel comfortable about voicing my own opinions and ideas, but eventually I was able to become more comfortable with that collaborative aspect of the project. However, even with these check-ins, as I'm sure many other people have experienced with remote work and remote education, you sort of have to be your own supervisor at times. People are not always available to help you, so I sometimes had to solve technological issues or design flaws on my own. This definitely gave me some independence and confidence professionally. Also, it sounds a little silly, but email communication skills became really important. I improved a lot in this area throughout my internship, having to write emails so often back and forth. So I definitely became more comfortable and confident in this area as well. And this was a really amazing internship opportunity for me as I plan on going to law school. So I appreciated learning legal jargon, the process of file intake and conflict checks, and what a passing of accounts is. And I also had the opportunity to sit in on a Zoom cross-examination during my internship, which is something I probably would not have otherwise had the chance to see if it had been in person. I won't say that I could conduct a cross-examination tomorrow, but I have a much better understanding of the formalities that are required to maintain professional decorum and the ways that you can ask the proper questions to form a narrative. The cross-examiner basically has to plan for the exact answers before they even ask the question, which requires a lot of intuition and preparation. So this has given me a glimpse of how much planning goes into every aspect of the legal profession. And how a lawyer sometimes is like a storyteller. Having had the experience of this internship, I know with certainty that I am interested in pursuing law school as a career, law school and a career in law. Doing this internship as part of the SASAH Experiential Learning program has helped me reflect on my experiences in constructive ways. I can say that having just finished a round of law school applications, being able to look back on my reflections and my summative report were really useful in helping me to articulate my experiences at Hull & Hall in terms of skills and assets in my application essays. So this was a really valuable experience in preparing me professionally and academically for my future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samantha. So questions? Yes, Sarah Charette.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of a question about your experience previously at Hull & Hull, but you said, so you worked there for like 2 different summers. How would you say that the work really changed? I mean, obviously you were working on a different project, but kind of the dynamic, how do you feel that that changed going from working in person to working online?
That's a really good question. So in my first 2 summers at Hull & Hull, I was working with a lot of other summer students. So all of them were also in undergraduate degrees or in school. And we all were given collective projects. So there was always someone to ask, always someone to bounce ideas off of. And in our first year, we actually had a student synergy, which was separate from the one that I showed you in my presentation. So it was a lot more of a, in-person collaborative environment. We worked on bigger projects, I think, because you could share the workload. So we worked on foreign estates files, and we would draft letters to fellow lawyers or clients to see if the file needed to be closed because they were all inherited from another lawyer who had passed away. And so we had to figure out where we stood on all of that. But it was really different working with other summer students versus working with, you know, a lawyer over the phone. That was also really intimidating, but it was a good experience for sure.
Great. Other questions? Maybe I'll ask a quick question that seems probably to have more to do with culture than law, but I was thinking about the kind of environment you're working in and probably where you're encountering infighting in families. And I wonder how much of the kind of emotional kind of response that one might have to that type of thing you have to set aside. I realize you're not actually acting as a lawyer yet, but you must have had some exposure to some of the kinds of tensions around that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a really heartbreaking field of law because most of it, it's all families fighting with each other. And usually a parent has passed away and it's siblings fighting over money or property. And it can get really messy really fast. And so when I was listening to that Zoom cross-examination that I got to sit in on, it was really hard to listen to. I don't really know how the lawyers were able to hide their emotions and, you know, keep professional decorum because it was really difficult to hear. And it becomes, you know, sometimes that you've had a sibling that's taken advantage of the parent. So it actually happens more often than you would think, where a child has either drained the funds from the parent's bank account before they've passed away, switched the house or property into their name, taken advantage of capacity issues. It's really a difficult area.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your answer, because we know that, that, you know, you're dealing with the law, but you're also dealing with people, and that's very complicated. Great, thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you.
We're going to move on and hear from Sierra Joseph, and I guess I won't resist saying, and now for something completely different. Sierra is talking about her experience with Disney.
I sure am. Let me just get into character for a second here, and I will share my screen. Can someone just give me a little thumbs up that everything looks the way it's supposed to? Amazing. All right. So hi, everyone. I'm Sierra, and as Patrick mentioned, I completed my experiential learning credit as an internship at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, where I was a slide operator at the Typhoon Lagoon water park. So how did I end up working at Disney? I went under the Cultural Exchange Program, which is a summer program that allows international post-secondary education students to work in Orlando during their summer vacations. The Cultural Exchange Program, or CEP, operates as a part of Disney International and Disney College programs, giving domestic and international students the opportunity to work with the Walt Disney Company. This includes placement all over Disney property, including the theme parks, resorts, and different commercial aspects. While participating in the CEP, students are able to live in one of 4 Disney-sponsored housing complexes and use a bus system made specifically for them to get across property. And I would go to theme parks on my days off because one of the many benefits of this program is free admission to all the theme parks. There are other benefits, of course, but that was the one I definitely took the most advantage of. So while headed to Disney, I had multiple goals in mind. First were my personal goals, where I was going to be living in Disney World. I wanted to work hard and play hard, making magic during my working hours and experiencing the magic on my days off. And this also meant I got to explore connections within the company in Florida. The program goals live under a slogan, living, earning, and learning. We get to live in close proximity to the parks on Disney property. We get to earn money, of course, but also a lot of different customer service skills. And for learning, we get to learn from one of the most innovative entertainment companies, and also learning more about ourselves through this experience. And making this a SASAH internship gave me another set of goals where I needed to be aware and critical of my experience. This was done through personal and academic reflections, and it forced me to not just be a Disney fan finally working at the parks, but to bring my critical thinking and SASAH education to contextualize my experience. So what did I actually do? As a slide operator, I worked 20 different positions at 9 different attractions in the water park, which are indicated by the little symbols here. And slide operating is deemed a safety critical role, so there's a greater emphasis on proper procedure while making magic. This includes lots of coordination between slide ops, lifeguards, leaders, and managers. I worked all kinds of shifts, including special or private events, which meant I had all kinds of schedules, starting at 7 a.m., finishing at 3 a.m., but generally working that 35 to 40 plus hour range. Very quickly, I learned how recreations attractions was different from the traditional parks. At the water parks, guests are taking a mini vacation from their vacation in this more relaxed environment. This also creates a great sense of community within the cast members where I felt truly supported and welcomed there. There was also a lot of other international student cast members, and I love my relationships with this group because we all brought different sets of knowledges and perspectives to working at Disney. And here we're greeting you with our traditional cowabunga sign, which is officially all clear, but used for just about anything. So learning to work at Disney, it's founded on one statement: we create happiness. This seems like a simple goal, but there are a lot of different aspects that work together to achieve it. After all, at Disney, we don't have big shoes to fill, we have big ears to fill. Traditions is the first day of training, which is a full day at Disney University, including a backstage tour of Magic Kingdom, learning all the company secrets, and officially becoming a cast member. On this day, we learn that it's a combination of story, immersive experience, and guest service that create the magic of the Disney parks. We also learn about the 4 keys, which are safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency, that guide how Disney operates and are prioritized in order. Working at Disney also means you will be basically speaking in code with a combination of Disney and themed language, acronyms, and numerical codes. This includes knowing the story of Typhoon Lagoon and weaving it into guest experience. This is a sentence I could have said at work at any given time, and just a breakdown of what all the different pieces mean to show you how complex it could get. I wouldn't say this to a guest, but to my fellow cast members. And so I believe that we were shaped by a culmination of all of our experiences. So living was accomplished by everything I did at Disney. And this included making incredible friends that I still talk to today as they looked over this presentation for me. Representing Canada, often via my name tag, meant a great deal to me because I was able to have incredible discussions about culture and place, and even met a Western alumna while I was working. I hope portraying myself in the best regard, portray Canada well as well. Slide operating was definitely a more physically demanding job than I anticipated, and working every day in the Florida heat can get to you. But being a slide operator is also called being a life coach. We're the ones that give that extra reassurance and push that, yes, you can go down the slide, and I promise it's more fun sliding down than walking down. I truly felt like I belonged when I worked at Disney. Most people who work there love Disney, have great energy and spirit, and we all chose to be there because it fits who we are. This is a photo of my first time at Walt Disney World when I was 4 years old. So it was truly a dream to be completely immersed in the Disney magic. And as you can see with this Facebook comment, I've been looking to do this program since high school. My tangible results come from the skills that I learned and improved upon over the summer. This list is just a start because I truly believe working at Disney strengthened my work ethic and adaptability in jobs. For teamwork, some slides had multiple people working them, and if not, there was always a rotation system involved that needed to be worked through efficiently and safely to get through the day. In de-escalation, Disney is home to the most and least magical moments you'll experience. So when things get a little dicey, cast members need to remain calm under stressful conditions for anything that comes our way. In leadership, especially on slides when there is only one slide operator, you need to be able to control the line and guests if necessary, and this necessitates clear communication, assertiveness, and rule enforcing with a smile. This was also definitely a resume booster, as everyone has asked about it since I've done the program, and I'm able to frame it. And I can't help but mention the Instagram content that I got over the summer. These are just some of the incredible memories that I have from that summer, and no things I will hold on to forever. There's an incredible amount of stories that I will hold on to far beyond this presentation and this internship. So these are my first and my latest name tags. The first is from my day at Traditions, where I officially became a cast member at Disney University. And the next is now that I'm working at the Disney store at Masonville Mall. So if you ever need a little extra magic during your holiday shopping, please come say hello. Walt Disney said that you can design and create and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality. I'm so fortunate to have a tiny piece of making this dream a reality, and the summer will always hold a special place in my heart because, in all honesty, it was my dream that became a reality that summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra. That was magical. We have a question. So Sophia asks, how did you feel working for a mega corporation as huge as Disney?
Well, there's definitely a lot of moving pieces at all times. Because of the water park, there's a lot of divisions of work. There's obviously slide operators and lifeguards who are doing the attractions, but you have food and beverage and customer service and merchandise, and you all need to work together to create an incredible experience. So there was a lot of trust in all of the situations that everyone's doing what they can. Of course, there was backup through our leaders and managers. But I couldn't help but be aware that I was like a tiny cog in this giant wheel of not just this water park, but this whole vacation. But also I'll say for the guest, they are only seeing you as a person that they're interacting with. They're not necessarily thinking about the whole operation. So knowing I am one person that they're interacting with and trying to make interactions a little more special, a little more magical, was still important. So it was, yes, knowing that I'm just one person, but knowing how I fit into a larger structure was a little wild, but definitely fun.
Thank you. Era?
Hi, Sierra. That was really fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm curious to know whether your experience with Disney, and it's ongoing, as I see, how that informs your sense of what you want to do in your career ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, first working for Disney, it was like, oh, I love Disney movies and the company. I'd love to do that. But working there in the summer really did open me up to a lot of the different pieces that work. You know, I think we're easy to recognize the parks and the movies as the most important parts, but there's a lot behind the scenes that gets done that I could see myself being a part of. So in our Traditions Day, we kind of get to learn a lot about that. And knowing that other corporations must operate like this, that they have a lot of writers and researchers and things like that, that more are potentially a little more compatible with what I'm doing now, instead of, I don't think I want to be working a water slide for the rest of my life. Maybe if they offer, but who's to say? But knowing that there are all those kind of opportunities that do exist kind of behind the scenes that are just as big of a part as making the magic as the people you see on the front lines, so to speak. So I think it really opened my eyes to how a big corporation like that can work and all the different opportunities there are beyond just working in the parks.
Thanks.
And we have one last quick question, which we'll just give you a minute to answer. So did your perspective of Disney change after working for the company, or as you have been working for the company?
That's a great question. I don't know if it completely changed my experience, but it definitely informed my perspective, because as I mentioned, it's kind of very magical, but there's also some less magical moments. And I think part of my understanding as I work there is that it's a company just like everyone else. That yes, they want to make magic, but above that, they want to make money. So experiencing that from the worker side and kind of, you know, we can say the student program is great, but also student labor has different laws than regular people. So you can kind of contextualize the experience in that way. I don't want to sound like Mickey Mouse is evil or anything, but there definitely is a lot of nuance to those spaces that you kind of get the backstage view. It changes things a little bit. I don't think it completely broke the magic. I obviously am still working for the company, so I couldn't have changed my perspective too much. But there definitely is more at play that I think I got to experience because of this.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sierra. And I will add that it strikes me that you don't strike me as somebody who's very cynical at all, but somebody who has a great critical mind. And that seems like a really great combination for more than just Disney. So I'm going to turn it over to Hadi Canny, who is going to talk about his experience at Connect.
Okay, so let me just this. Can you guys see the presenter view, or is it just a normal PowerPoint right now?
Yeah, I think we can see the presenter view.
I ran across. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing screen. I've been having like technical problems with my like with my share screen. So, okay. Am I sharing the screen now?
Yeah, it didn't unshare.
Oh, do I unshare it? Like, can I unshare the screen and then
unshare it yourself?
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that looks good now.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'm going to be talking about my 2 internships at a company called Connected, where I served as the marketing coordinator intern between my first and second and third year. So before anything, I wanted to give a bit of context about what Connected actually is, because the name doesn't exactly tell you too much about the industry that it's in or what its services are. So here we go. Connected is a digital product development company. So what that is essentially is that they partner with organizations who need help developing some sort of digital product, be it an app or a platform or something like that. And what makes Connected unique in the space is that they work end to end. So whether it be like the ideation of the product or the actual prototyping and release, they can do all of that. And they kind of explain this in 4 steps. So the first, they can identify the problem space or consumer demand. They can make functioning prototypes. They can release these prototypes, and they can evolve and iterate based on the release. Their slogan is "Build Better Products." And this is just from their website. They're driven by singular focus on realizing business impact through software-powered products. So everything is digital. One more thing I wanted to touch on quickly is the culture. This stuck out to me quite a bit. When I was hired, my manager gave me sort of a talk about Connected's values, which are smart, kind, reliable, and being a teacher and learner. I thought originally that these were just sort of buzzwords they were using, and they were just paying lip service to the idea of being a socially conscious company. But the more I worked there, the more I realized they do hold these values in high regard. And in fact, there was an opening halfway through my first internship in the marketing department. And there were 2 finalists for the position. One had, my manager told me, a phenomenal application, but didn't seem to display these values during the interview. Whereas the other applicant had a good resume, but not as strong, but really showed these values, and he hired the person with, I guess you could say, the weaker resume. And that was sort of eye-opening and a powerful moment for me, because I kind of went into it thinking about, okay, profit is the bottom line, you know, just the sort of typical business stuff. But seeing that really gave me confidence in the company I was working in, and it made me more motivated, you know, to do my best, because at least the company had some human-centered values that I agreed with. Next, internship 1. So what did I do? I joined the company when they were about 60% done, or 60% through a complete rebrand. When I joined, they were actually called Connected Lab, but they wanted to become Connected. They wanted to change their whole marketing angle. And to do this, they had to change the website, the branding, the social media strategy, and all that. So it was interesting. I was kind of thrust into the middle of all of this. The first thing I did was social media. So I wrote the copy for the Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram posts using Hootsuite. So it was good. I learned that program. I tried to research on SEO, so search engine optimization, how to better the company's SEO, because Connected is not the best name for that. So I created a document and made a list of recommendations for the new website. I did a lot of competitor research. This was probably the biggest thing I did during my first internship. I researched companies that were in the same digital product development space as Connected. So the main ones were Shopify, McKinsey Digital, TribalScale, and Us2. I kind of looked at 2 things. The first was their website, so the content and the design of their websites, and second was their social media strategy and presence. And then halfway through my internship, I created a list of recommendations for our website, which was being built, as well as our social media strategy. And while not all of my recommendations were accepted, some were, and I was really happy with that, because it gave me confidence both in my work and confidence that my work was being valued, and I wasn't, you know, just doing non-important things. I actually impacted the company in important ways, in my opinion. So I was really happy with that. And the last thing I did, this was just a little competition my manager and I made, was called Retire the Brand. So while we were rebranding internally, we created this competition where employees would bring back digital or physical assets that had the old Connected Lab branding, and they would get a point. And at the end of the competition, whoever had the most points would win a swag package of the new branding, whether it be t-shirts or things like that. So that was fun, and all the employees really got into it. So that just kind of added to the fun and like exciting environment for the upcoming internal launch. And this is a picture of the marketing team during the internal launch party. We're wearing the new connected t-shirts. And as you can see, there's only 5 of us. At the time, the company was had 130 people, I want to say. So we were the smallest department, but everyone was really kind. They really supported me in sort of the learning process. And yeah, so I had a great time during my first internship. Internship 2, so the next summer, what did I do? I did 3 main things. Again, I did social media, but unlike last time, I didn't have to check in with anyone before I posted anything. It was nice to have that trust, and I created the schedule for the time I was there, as well as a few months after. So that was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. Second was the Connected blog. So Connected has a blog that they plan on writing sort of 2 to 3 articles a week on, and I ghost wrote this. So no one actually writes it, it's the marketing team. There are a few types of blogs. The first is a connector spotlight, which is just an employee spotlight. Second is case studies. Then there's product thinking for engineers and designers. And then the fourth main one is the ethics of accessibility in digital products. This was really rewarding because I had to interview employees, usually they're computer scientists, and sort of translate what they were telling me, which was usually computer science related and extremely technical, into something a layperson could understand. And obviously I don't know much about computer science, so that was challenging, but at the same time, extremely rewarding. And I think that was a really useful skill that I learned there. And then the last thing I did was I created a marketing opportunity database. So I researched the top tech writers and journalists in Toronto and San Francisco, so that the marketing team could reach out to them for press inquiries and things like that. So I know I'm running a little late. It wasn't all work. Again, it was a great culture. We went go-karting, we went axe throwing, there were games in the office. And on the right, this was on my last day, the team surprised me with going out to lunch. And again, that just made me feel like part of the company and not just an intern who was there for 4 months. And last thing are my takeaways. I had 3 main ones. So be comfortable being uncomfortable. Coming from a humanities background into the tech space, of which I had no prior knowledge, was pretty stressful for me. But I had to learn just to roll the punches and realize that I'd be in the dark for a lot of it. But bit by bit, day by day, I just have to build up my knowledge base. So yeah, I had to be comfortable being uncomfortable. 2 is active listening. This kind of goes hand in hand. I had to ask a lot of clarifying questions, whether it be jargon, just the way the business worked and things like that. And just as important as asking the questions, I had to really listen, digest the answers, and understand what everyone was saying. I didn't want to ask the same question twice. And just again, I wanted to get better every day. And 3rd, it's what you make of it. During my first internship at the very beginning, I was given tasks that I didn't find necessarily challenging or rewarding, and I wasn't too happy about it. But after a while, I realized, everything is what you make of it. And I thought that if I showed the team that I was willing to do more and that I had the capabilities to do more, they would be receptive. And they were. They gave me different tasks, things that were more challenging, more rewarding, and that just created a kind of a good cycle. So thank you for coming to my presentation. Sorry I ran a little late, but happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Hattie. Really interesting. So try and unshare your screen.
Oh yeah, sorry.
See who's
let's see here.
Champing at the bit to ask a question. Era, please.
It's actually a question that I would have for all of the students. So, we don't have time for them all to answer, but I decided to ask you, Hattie, how do you think that the SASAH program helped prepare you for your internship, if at all?
Yeah, that was something I was really curious about going into it. because it kind of seems so almost like diametrically opposed to the work that I've been doing in school. But when I was there, I found that I did a lot of writing, of course, like everyone else, and I found that just sort of the skills I've learned through SASAH and Western in general really helped. The writing so I co-ghost wrote the blog with our communication specialist, and she in university, she took comp sci. So it was interesting to see kind of different styles of writing. And I found that I was able to kind of clarify a lot of things in the way that she was writing, and she was able to help me kind of write in more of a business sense. So I think that would be the biggest one. And yeah, I would say that. Second, I was really happy again just with the values. Connected was a lot more human-centered than I thought, and just coming from SASAH and sort of that human-centered perspective that we take on a lot of our assignments, I found that that really gelled well with a lot of the work that I did in terms of social media and things like that, the way that I worded the posts. So those would be the two main things.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'd love to hear from the other students if they want to write to me, tell me about that. That'd be great.
Thanks, Hattie.
Thank you.
I guess maybe one quick question. Would you say that those values that you said they actually do really uphold, do you think that with a company like such as this, where there is a lot that's about using technology for business, do you think it's more important for that kind of company that might seem as if there's less opportunity for a kind of human-centeredness? Do you think it's more important, or is this just the new world of work that it needs, that kind of thinking needs to happen everywhere?
I would say the latter. Well, because there's a big emphasis. They knew that a big thing that I found really interesting, and we had a lot of meetings about this in terms of accessibility, was sort of like elderly people who didn't have as much experience with technology. And I found that I was able to sit in on a lot of different meetings, and the engineers and the designers really took everyone into account in their designing. And even though, let's say, some portion of that population perhaps wouldn't even use the products, they still like took them into account and kind of shaped everything around that. And I found that really important because, you know, as time goes on, things are just moving, products are becoming more and more digital. And these values, I think, are important to kind of have, they call it like a North Star to orient everything by. And it's really easy. It's really easy to kind of slide things into products that are not exactly ethical and kind of make the job of the designer and the engineer easier. But for the consumer, kind of makes things more difficult, and it's a bit underhanded. A lot of companies do this, whether it be through contracts or things like that. So just for them to have these values, I think sets a really good precedent and a really good standard. Of course, I don't know about other companies in the field if they take these values into the same weight, but nonetheless, I think it is important moving forward for really every company. Great, thank you very much. Really interesting answer. So finally, we're coming to Will Sharp's presentation. He's going to be talking about the Forest City Film Festival and also Western Libraries. So over to you, Will.
Great, thanks, Patrick. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, how does this look? Everything okay? Yeah, sorry, before I begin, my laptop fan does sound like a jet engine when I do these things, so if it ever become hard to hear, someone please just yell at me. But yes, this afternoon I'm going to talk briefly about my experience with the Forest City Film Festival and Western Libraries. So my first adventure in experiential learning was with the Forest City Film Festival starting in September of last year. So I'll start with a little background on the festival. So the Forest City Film Festival is an annual celebration here in London. It brings together the best work of film artists connected to Southwestern Ontario. This year, the festival screened over 70 films, and they also host workshops and networking events to foster filmmaking talent from this area. From my outside perspective, at least, London doesn't have the reputation of like an art city. You know, everyone knows TIFF, which is a shame because there's a lot of really talented people here, as I've seen from my work with the festival. So it's really good that this festival kind of, you know, brings their work to light. And it's strange, I find, to look back at photos of crowds, But this one on the left is a shot from the festival's opening year, the opening night, sorry, the year that I was there. We screened a documentary called Pray, which is an account of sexual abuse survivors' fight against the Catholic Church. It was a really, really powerful film, and the Q&A after was amazing. And this screening and experience like really showed me what the festival was all about. And I know things have been a little different this year, but I believe the festival still sold over 2,000 tickets, which is just an amazing feat. Dorothy Downs, the executive director, does a fantastic job each year. And Nandita, who was my supervisor when I was there, does amazing work with all the interns. It's really just a great organization. So this is me. I started as a marketing intern with the festival in September 2019. And at this point, I had no experience in this kind of thing. You know, I'd worked the previous summer at a restaurant and before that in landscaping, so this is all very, very new. A large part of my role consisted of writing blog posts about that year's films. So I had to watch all these selected films, and then I would write about some of them to highlight, you know, why you should come and see them. I also hopped on social media during the festival to help capture the experience. I'm not an active social media user, and I quickly realized it's not as easy as it looks. I also acted as a filmmaker concierge, which essentially meant working with some of the filmmakers to help them navigate the festival and ensure they had the best possible experience. So when it came to these blogs, I noticed very quickly after I started that I had a lot to learn about writing. I spent the past 2 years at school writing a certain way, and it came to my attention that a lot of the time, people don't really want to read that style. So when I was writing these blog style reviews of films, I had to change my approach. The good news is I had a lot of writing experience to fall back on, so it wasn't a difficult transition, but it was a great eye-opener because it showed me that I needed to adjust my writing depending on the task at hand. And so I really couldn't have asked for much more from this first experience. A lot of my role was watching films and writing about them, which is fantastic. Being at the festival for that weekend was a great, if exhausting, experience. And as I said, perhaps the biggest takeaway was trying out these new forms of writing and learning that I'd always need to adapt. It was also my first experiential learning experience, and at times it pushed me outside my comfort zone. I remember I had to host one of the film screenings on the Saturday night of the festival. You know, I stood in front of the sold out film theater and it was terrifying. I've never done anything like that before. But I'm glad that I could say I did it. It feels really good. And then a couple months later, I was lucky enough to use my experiences with the festival when I was applying for the second internship with Western Libraries. And for a short time, at least, I worked there in the very lovely building that's Weldon Library. So I worked for the library as a communications and marketing intern. As I said, I spent a little time in the offices, but most of my time, unfortunately, was spent working from home in my parents' house. So a large part of my role with the library was drafting written communications. And again, I thought back to what I'd learned, excuse me, at the festival. You know, it's about using the writing skills that I developed in university, but also about being adaptable and applying them to different situations. I also had the opportunity to dive further into the world of social media. You know, I learned what it takes to run an account across multiple platforms, from coming up with the content to post, to scheduling them and then actually putting it all together. Again, I really think it's a lot more work than it looks. And so what was great about my time at the library was it really built on what I'd already done at the festival. You know, I had to do new forms of writing that still called back to what I'd done at university, but forced me to adapt even further. And again, it really took my knowledge around social media and what it takes to run a brand like that to a whole nother level. And so part of the communications writing that I was just talking about included reporting on the library's news. So it was my job to talk to researchers and librarians to see what they were working on and turn these into news updates. And of course, at this point, I'd never taken a journalism course. So I had to learn these interviewing skills, a whole new style of writing, all kind of on the fly. But like I've said before, you know, I believe all of us here have the skills to do these things. It's just a matter of being adaptable and trying out these things in new situations. And as part of my social media duties, I also had the opportunity to work on the graphic side of things, something I'd never done before. I'm probably the world's worst artist, but my supervisor at least let me try some design and photography. And by the end of the internship, I produced some like pretty fun things. These are a couple of book faces we did on Instagram every Friday. Took me an embarrassingly long time to do, but I think they turned out pretty well. So again, I came away with lots of great experiences. One of the less tangible upsides to my time with the library was learning what it's like to work for a big organization. You know, Western Libraries, and by extension, the university itself, has so many policies and regulations. And so when I was writing these communications, there's so many hoops I had to jump through. And I didn't always enjoy that. It was tough, but I know it was a good experience. And of course, I also got to try some journalism and do a deeper dive into the world of social media, which included some fun experimentation with graphics, some which actually turned out okay. And so to kind of wrap up my experiences, I'm going to echo particularly what Hadi said actually about the importance of getting out of your comfort zone. You know, for me, hosting that film screening was terrifying, but I'm thrilled to say that I did it. I also want to say that every experience matters. You know, a little over a year ago, I had no experience in marketing, communications, or journalism, and I'm grateful now to have had the chance to try these things out. You know, each experience I had built on the previous one, and for me, it's definitely been a process. It took a while to shake the feeling that, you know, like I didn't really belong here, I don't know what I'm doing, but as these presentations and the ones before me have shown, we all belong in our respective roles and we all have the skills to succeed. So thank you, that's my presentation.
Thanks, Will. That was a great way to round up the whole group. So are there questions for Will? I have an observation, and you sort of alluded to it, but I was thinking earlier, one of your colleagues was talking about having worked at Western and having worked in another operation, and here you're talking about working with the Forest City Film Festival and Western. And in your case, it strikes me that, you know, Western is kind of the big corporation and the Forest City Film Festival is not such a big corporation. In fact, I don't think it's a corporation. It's probably a nonprofit by virtue of how it would define itself. So I wonder if you have any kind of broad observations about, you know, you mentioned the complexity of dealing with just communication at Western. Do you have any other observations that you might use as takeaways when you think about the world of work for yourself?
It is tough because they were very different experiences. One was not better than the other. I found with the film festival, for instance, I had a lot more freedom. You know, I could write about whatever aspect of the film struck me. Whereas with the libraries, I was very, very, like everything I wrote, for example, was proofread many, many, many times. So it just, that kind of thing, it's hard to explain, I find. But as I said, there was just always a lot of hoops to jump through. So you'd write something and then it probably wouldn't get published until, you know, months later. There was no fast turnaround because everyone had to look at it, which was in a way kind of frustrating because you want to see your stuff out there. But at the same time, like you had to be patient and make sure that it was all, you know, correct and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you. That certainly resonates. Anything else? One thing I would observe in that regard is certainly having worked in the arts a fair amount myself, I've also had the experience of showing my art at the at Pearson International Airport, and it was like a completely different world, and the art was treated a little bit like the content, and you know, it was a completely different cultural experience. So I'm not saying Western did that to your writing, but I think there is a way in which, you know, the kind of organization you're working for determines a lot about the way that your work will actually get framed.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great moment to say we're done all the presentations. I'm now going to turn it over to our Associate Director, Arasuksi, to wrap things up.
Right. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just want to say you have to be commended. The professionalism of not only the placements that you described, but the way you presented about your experiences today is so impressive. And I find it just to be one of the most gratifying experiences for me, to feel so privileged to be working with a group of students like this and who are doing so many interesting things and really getting out there and learning about yourselves in the context of that zone of discomfort in so many cases. And it's just been great to hear about it. I do think that you obviously got a lot of value from your experiential learning, but it's clear to me that you also gave a lot of value back to the organizations and the communities that you were working with. And some of the stories are just so moving to hear. So thank you for that. I really want to single out Dr. Barbara Bruce right now for all of the work that she does in creating the placements and organizing them and coordinating this event today. I don't know what SASAH would be without her. I don't even want to think about that. So thanks so much, Barb, for your work. And I also want to thank all of the guests who joined us here today. Their supportive presence means so much to the program, and I think so much to the students as well. I would say, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you want to hear anything more about SASAH and what we do here. So with that, I will just close off the day, and thank you all so much.
Fantastic job, everyone.
And I will also add that the presentations do get published on Scholarship at Western. So that's a great repository to see this wonderful history of experiential learning from our program. So all the best, enjoy your Friday and have a nice weekend. Great to see everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.